I am honored to be here before you as a woman, a public school mom, and an elected official. In my campaigns for County Superintendent of Schools, I appreciate the vital role of the Mendocino Women's Political Coalition and why women must continue to support and empower one another to become political leaders. In 2018, you elected me to bring change to the Office of Education. I led our office into the 21st century by adopting new technology supports, valuing critical thinking, and prioritizing problem solving over rote skills. Before my first term, the office passed state money directly to districts instead of providing the services prescribed by the California Department of Education. This resulted in outdated resources and low student achievement. I changed that. I created a new management team and built the capacity to serve all 12 districts and 12 charter schools effectively and efficiently. As a result, every child now matters in Mendocino County. My commitment to our students and community is to improve student achievement, expand leadership opportunities, and engage with real-world problem solving, and increase access to mental health supports. I'm courageous enough to buck the system, test cultural limitations, and work to bridge social boundaries. I am not afraid to take risks, as risk is an important ingredient of change. The changes you elected me to make are well underway. What is needed now is stable and productive leadership. Although I am an elected official, I am not a politician. In fact, it's improper for me to solicit endorsements from people who work for the schools whose paychecks I write, especially those beholden to superintendents who have endorsed the other candidate. I have, however, been endorsed by Senator Mike McGuire, Assemblymember Jim Wood, and I have the unprecedented endorsement of every independently elected member of the County Board of Education. I have the support of Supervisors Haschak and McGordy, of Dave Eister, members of the Mendocino Board of Trustees, and a growing number of prominent community members. Experience matters, and it matters now more than it ever has before. Please learn more at reelectmichellehutchins.com. Thank you.
Thank you. And now an opening statement from Nicole Glentzer.
Yes, I'm Nicole Lancer. I'm a candidate for County Superintendent of Schools for Mendocino County. I started my career about 26 years ago as a paraprofessional. I was a bilingual paraprofessional helping elementary children learn English, which was an inspiring job to have, and I absolutely fell in love with working in schools, seeing kids, especially kids from underprivileged homes or from homes where they were overcoming so many obstacles. It was inspiring to see education change their lives and change the lives of their families. So I went back to school and I got my teaching credential and started to just immerse myself in schools. I taught high school, so I got to help kids apply for college, apply for scholarships, apply for jobs. I did everything I could think of to help. And eventually started taking on leadership, supporting other teachers, mentoring them and helping them along the way as they started their career in education. Eventually I was asked to join the leadership team, first as an assistant principal and then as a principal. About 11 years ago now, I became superintendent in Potter Valley. And in that job, I was the superintendent and the elementary school principal, the director of special ed, the director of maintenance, operation, and transportation, and for one semester, the Spanish teacher. So I'm pretty familiar with the needs of our smaller school districts and the many hats that our school district superintendents wear in our smaller districts. For the last 8 years, I've been the assistant superintendent for human resources for Ukiah Unified. And I've had the privilege of working with leaders throughout our county on many issues. Most recently, of course, COVID, which is an issue that we're still dealing with, but over the last couple of years has been just some very intense work. So working with leaders in our county and in our state to address the issues that COVID have brought to schools has been some really rewarding work and really challenging work. Right now, I want to help Mendocino County schools overcome some really significant challenges that we're facing right now, namely the staffing shortage, which is something that we've always struggled with, but is especially difficult right now. It's acute in our school districts. And I also want to help with COVID recovery. As we come out of this pandemic, which I realize we're not out of yet, but at some point, it's going to be something we talk about in the past tense and not the present tense. We're going to need to address some of the damage that COVID has done. We've got students who are struggling with reading, they're struggling with social emotional issues. There's a lot of work that needs to be done. I want to work collaboratively with our school districts, with our charter schools, to help overcome some of these issues. And I look forward to your questions. Again, I'm Nicole Glentzer. I'm running for County Superintendent of Schools.
Thank you. At this point, candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to questions, alternating who responds first. So let's start with the first question. And Nicole Glentzer, could you be the responding first? What do you consider the most pressing issues facing the Mendocino County Office of Education?
The most pressing issue that we have, there are a lot, but the most pressing issue is the staffing shortage. I say that because every issue that we have is made worse by the fact that we don't have the people to fill in the positions to address the issues, whether it's attendance, reading, dealing with the equity gap that we have in our schools. All of those issues require people to address them. And we're having a hard time finding those people. And when we do, we're often finding people who are new to working in schools, new to teaching. So they need a great deal of support. And we're having a difficult time getting people to support the new people. So it really comes down to people, which is what most organizations come down to, is the quality of the people that you find. And we have a lot of quality people in our schools, but some of them are retiring, some of them are tired. All of them are tired, let's be honest, they're all tired. We really need to address the staffing shortage. And one of the things we need to address in that is the fact that people are getting burnt out. So addressing the biggest need that we have in our schools is with staffing. So we need to work on recruitment, we need to work on the mental health of the people that are currently in our school districts, and we need to give them the support that they require. And I'm going to take this opportunity to mention that I'm endorsed by several labor organizations and over 100 teachers and educators and board members in Mendocino County. Over the last several years, it's become apparent that there's more support that they need. And I've kind of defined the last several years of my career in focusing on supporting the adults in our educational system.
Thank you. Ms. Hutchins. Low student achievement. The fact that our county scores have stagnated at a very low level for multiple years is the priority that I place for the Mendocino County Office of Education. We stand as 58 county superintendents collectively asking the legislature to please look at how we support student achievement. We currently have a reactive approach. Schools have to go into differentiated assistance, which means they have to not meet the state targets with one of their subpopulations in order to get support from the County Office of Education. That needs to switch to a more preventative approach where we're not waiting for students to fail and instead guiding districts with an improvement mindset from the beginning. The 58 county superintendents have asked the legislator to please change in which the way that they're funding differentiated assistance to support a more preventative approach. And that successfully made it into the May revise from that work. In the last 20 years, California has not closed the achievement gap. The achievement gap being our ethnic students or students from subpopulations not meeting the same levels of the general population of the schools. That gap has only widened with the pandemic. The processes of continuous improvement have shown to close that gap across the state. This is why the 58 county superintendents stood collectively to ask the legislator to change the funding stream to be proactive rather than reactive. We were successful so far. We'll see when we get to the end of the budget. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question. If you had $10 million to spend, what would you spend it on? What programs would you institute or expand?
Is that 10 million extra dollars?
Yes, 10 million extra dollars.
So first, it's important to understand that $10 million is not a lot of money. When you look at our school districts, Ukiah Unified's average budget is about $104 million. Fort Bragg is around $33 million. Willits Unified about $23 million. Anderson Valley around $8 million. When we get to our small schools, they're around $2 million. So $10 million isn't gonna do a lot, but what would I do with $10 million? I would make sure we had a computer lab in every high school that had every piece of industry standard software that businesses used. It would be an elective class that students voluntarily enrolled in that would solve real-world local problems using real-world industry software. The teachers wouldn't teach the software, but rather teach the students how to reach out to industry and invite industry into the classroom to teach the students how to utilize the software. Presentations to the community groups that benefit from the projects in which the students complete would be required, that they're doing active community presentations. We'd run this like a small business, and the students would get not only presentation, project management, but also entrepreneur skills. I've run this program in the past in Eureka City Schools. It ran for 15 years, and it really changed the whole shape and culture of the community. And it can work here. So that's what I would do with $10 million.
Thank you. Ms. Glentzer?
Yeah, $10 million would go really quick when you look at how many people work in education, the number of students that we have. But I think if I had one shot at $10 million, I think I'd put that toward people, investing in the education for some of our paraprofessionals or teachers' aides in some of our schools that would like to go back to school and get their teaching credential, but because they can't afford to do so and also work, I'd love to provide those people with a scholarship that they need to be able to get the teaching credential, because that's one of the best ways we can address our teaching shortage is by helping the people that are currently here. Those are people that already have houses here. We don't have to worry about once they get here, are they gonna find a place to live? They're already here. So I think I'd invest in things like training for paraprofessionals to become teachers and bus drivers. The shortage of bus drivers in our county is outrageous. Nationwide, there's a shortage of bus drivers. But in a county like ours, where we have so many children living in remote areas, that is, the shortage of bus drivers is contributing to our low attendance, because it's hard for a working family to get their children to school. And when you see a bus route canceled, that's a big deal. So I think investing in people, again, get more people trained to become bus drivers. We have the buses, we just need the people for them. So I think finding ways and that's a one-time investment of $10 million that will pay back schools for years.
Thank you. Next question. What is the role of the county superintendent of schools, and how has it changed over the last 10 years?
Well, the role of the county superintendent is to oversee Mendocino County Office of Education, or the county office, whatever county it is, for budget oversight for the school districts. That's really important, that by statute, by law, that's required. And we have a lot of small school districts that rely heavily on the financial department in the county office of education. They also provide assistance to schools when they're not meeting certain benchmarks in student achievement. But one of the really important roles that a school or a county office of education should play is providing support to school districts in things that take up a lot of the school district's time. So for example, in Mendocino County, we have a lot of small school districts. They don't have a lot of staff in their district office. They have to do all the same reports, or at least most of them, that the larger school districts have to do, with not as many people to help them do that. And so the county office can lend a great deal of support by helping them with those reports, by providing templates and training for staff to complete those reports. And really one of the, when I was superintendent in Powder Valley, one of the biggest values I found in our county office was how the county superintendent would draw the superintendents together, the district superintendents together, to talk about current issues, to talk about negotiations, staffing, student achievement, whatever the issue that was taking up most of the time for the district superintendents, and that the county superintendent would draw them together so that they could learn from one another and support one another as they worked through those problems. And so really providing that, facilitating the collaboration of our school districts is a really important role of the county superintendent of schools.
Thank you.
So, the role. So we have the way in which California has designed schools, and this happens nationally as well. So you have locally elected school boards that hire a district superintendent. Those people together run your local school districts. In California, because of the size of our county, the legislature has dedicated the county superintendent as the local arm of the California Department of Education. So your role as county superintendent of schools is to superintend all of the schools in the county. Essentially what that means is to make sure they're meeting their state targets, both academically as well as financially. I look at the role of the county superintendent as representing the taxpayer and the student, because they are the two groups that have no one else looking out for them. And as looking out for the taxpayer and the student, you're making sure that the public funds are spent appropriately. You're making sure there's transparency of the work of the superintendents at the district and the boards at the boards at the district level. You're making sure you educate the community in how to engage with school districts, because it's another language. It's another world when you walk into a school district board meeting and you're not familiar with that culture or place. And so it's the role of the county superintendent to help the public engage with their local schools, as well as helping the schools collaborate. We just recently had a collaborative session of the 12 district superintendents in Fort Bragg. It was very successful. My office participated in the afternoon, where we listened to all kinds of wants and desires of the district superintendents, and it helps formulate what our plans are in the next school year.
Thank you. Next question. What authority does the state of California have over individual school districts and over the Mendocino County Office of Education?
Well, we have to follow the state constitution, but the authority, essentially the way the authority role works is your locally elected boards, your school district boards. They are in charge of selecting and approving the curriculum. They hire and fire the district superintendent. They do have ultimate hiring authority of all of the employees in the school district. Whereas the county office runs a little bit differently. You do have your county board of education. Your county board of education, which is elected independently and represents similar areas as the board of supervisors, They oversee the curriculum and vision for the community school and the court school that the County Office of Education runs. Whereas the county superintendent really has the authority of superintending over all of the schools in the county. So it's a unique relationship. The county superintendent also serves as the employer, whereas at a district level, the school board serves as an employer. So what authority does the state have? We have to follow Ed Code, which is, we've pretty much codified all of education's rules and regulations in California. And so that is what governs us. It's what gives the authority to the county office as well as to the school district is that education code. So,
this is a really big question. What authority does the state of California have? And it really depends on what you're talking about. One significant role that the state of California has is in issuing credentials to teachers and to administrators. That's a really important role because you need to make sure that you have qualified staff in front of your students. And the county office assists with that as well through the review of credentials for each district. They assist with, for example, when we hire somebody who's not fully credentialed, there's a credential analyst at the County Office of Education that will help make sure that the correct steps are taken to make sure that that person gets the credential they need. So credentialing is one area. Of course, there's Ed Code. One other really important California oversight group is the California Department of Education, and they help, of course, with making sure that the curriculum that the districts are using is state-adopted curriculum and aligned with the Common Core standards. There's also, in Ed Code, there's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of code in relation to the authority that a school board has, as opposed to a county office of education, and the school district has a lot of local control. For you elect a school board, they also care about how you use taxpayer money. That's a huge concern, I know, for school boards. And so the state of California has to make sure that the schools are following the proper guidelines for electing officials, that they're following the Brown Act and all of those things. There are so many state of California agencies, it's really kind of hard to narrow it down, but those are just a few.
Thank you. Can you look at the screen here? There's something on the screen that's...
It just says it's being recorded.
Yeah, but I'm wondering if people at home are... There we go. Thank you so much. Okay, this is a question that someone who is here today wrote. Ms. Glentzer and Ms. Hutchins, you are both running for the position of superintendent of schools. As a student myself, I'd like to ask you to help me and my fellow students understand what would you change or rechange during your tenure?
That's a terrific question. I'm first, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That's a terrific question. The primary thing that I would change is I think that there needs to be a much stronger level of collaboration in our county. We have some unique needs in Mendocino County. We have geographic barriers that other counties don't experience. We don't have a university in our county, which many counties have a university, and that's a really important distinction between Mendocino County and other counties because it affects not just where our students go to college, but also where we get our teachers. So we have a lot of challenges, and because we are fairly remote and we have so many small districts, it can be really difficult for the school district superintendents and the charter school leaders to find time to collaborate. And one of the important roles of this job is to help lead the leaders of the schools, to draw them together, to inspire them when they're tired, to keep them going in the really hard work that they're doing, while also listening to the particular needs of the school district. So what I would do differently is I would be much more targeted in in reaching out to our district leaders and to our charter school leaders to bring them together to solve some of our problems. That is, when I was superintendent in Potter Valley, one of the first things that happened was I was met by the county superintendent. I was introduced to all the people I would need to know to address the issues in my district, and I was recommended that I have a mentor, and they assigned a mentor to me. They provided so much support, and that's something that is an area of improvement that I would like to change when I become county superintendent. Good question.
So I believe this is a wave the magic wand question, am I correct? If I could have the world, right? The change I would make is I would remove time from being the constant in education. Currently, student learning is based on time, not based on learning. Students get to the end of the year and they've got where they've got, and then we move them to the next level. I would flip that. I would make learning the constant and time the variable, so that students can advance when they're ready instead of at a specific level of time. We can do this a lot in our curriculum today by switching to what's known as universal design for learning, giving students a bigger voice in the choices that they have and how they interact with the curriculum that they're presented. Universal design for learning is not a new concept. It's been around for about 10 years, but we see very little of it in our schools in Mendocino County. So put a big focus on making sure we have good trainings for universal design for learning throughout our county. We have started this process already, but I would expand it quite a bit. In addition, I would increase the student voice in our educational process. One of the things we're experimenting with is going into classrooms and asking students, how do you know what you're supposed to be doing right now? How do you know what excellent looks like? The feedback that we're getting from students, we're helping the schools implement into their local control accountability plans as their student engagement process. This is found to be a much stronger student voice than using a general student survey that generally your associated student body or your upper level students will complete, but not your whole student representation of your student body. Thank you.
Okay, next question. What have you done in the past 3 years that would reflect on your personal gifts you would bring to being superintendent? So this is geared toward your personal gifts and who you are as a person.
And I answer first?
Yes.
So
please.
we have transitioned Mendocino County Office of Education to really be a values-driven organization. I was asked recently at an event what that meant, because it is in my literature. When I came on 3.5 years ago, we had several agency values. We had 7. None of the employees could tell me what all 7 values were. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at those 7 values and determining which ones were what we called pay to play, meaning things like integrity, like you really need it just to show up to the job, and which ones were truly aspirational and ones that maybe the county office could never really achieve. And we honed down which ones we believed were truly core to the agency. So we now have 4. There's service, excellence, innovation, and teamwork. And those 4 core values are values I personally live by. We pour every decision that is made by the County Office of Education today through that value set. And if it comes out on the other side as checking all 4 boxes, we move forward. We have our employees look at their own personal work and assign or kind of align what they do in alignment with those 4 values. We have rewritten our job descriptions to include those 4 values, and we write our board reports in response to those 4 values. So I would say bringing a values-based leadership style and values-based driven processes to the county office.
Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Not at all. What have you done in the past 3 years that would reflect on your personal gifts you would bring to being superintendent?
The last 3 years, wow, the concept of time has changed during COVID. So I'm going back, what is 3 years ago? The last couple years of my career, I think I'm not alone in this, have been some of the most challenging in my career. As an educator, but as somebody working in human resources, negotiating with teachers to reopen schools has been a challenge. I bring this up, I'm endorsed by the teachers union and the classified union that I work with. We have a great relationship, but it was a really challenging time to reopen schools safely after remote learning was difficult. People were scared. We saw students suffering by not being in school. It was so challenging. And the personal gift, the skill that I have developed is really being able to have difficult conversations while making sure that we stay focused on what our common interests are. And what has gotten us through the last 3 years is that our common interest in schools, whether you're talking about management, classified employees, parents, students, teachers, our common value is the achievement of students and the well-being of students. And so no matter what the difficult conversation was, whether it was masks, vaccinations, whatever it was, bringing that conversation back down to the student, what is in the best interest of the student? We didn't always agree on what that was, but we could agree that it was our highest value. And what, in the last 3 years, what I have done that I think reflects my gift or the talent that I have focused on developing is having lots of difficult conversations while maintaining strong relationships with the people that I have often disagreed with.
Thank you. Next question. What causes low-ranking student achievement?
What causes low-ranking student achievement?
Yes.
Well, big question. One of the strongest indicators of student achievement is the family. Do they come from money? Do they speak English? Do they have a house? Those are not things that schools can control though, but that has a huge influence, the biggest influence on student achievement. So that means that the role of the school is to be the great equalizer for students, to really focus on equity. So no matter who walks through that school door, no matter what their home life is like, no matter what their primary language is, the job of the school is to provide access to high quality education. I recently was invited to visit Fort Bragg and saw some amazing work that they're doing to make sure that every student has access to really cool tools. I work in Ukiah Unified. We also do that. We have examples of that throughout the county where schools are trying to make sure that the cool things that wealthy kids get, poor kids get too. They should be able to have access to those things. And so that question is really big, but what it comes down to is the school's job is to figure out what is lacking for that student and then provide it, which is why we're all so tired, because you have to ask that all the time, and there's always something that you can be improving.
This is an area I believe I differ from the other candidate in this race. A school system is designed to get the result it gets. If it's getting poor student achievement, it's designed to get poor student achievement. It is not the student's fault, nor the family's. It is the school system's. And this is not the teacher's fault or the people that work in the school district, but it is the system that those people have designed. The California Department of Education has spent the last 9 years training departments of education, county offices of education, to be able to help schools look at their systems. And what do I mean by that? What I mean is sometimes it's not academic. Sometimes it's the way a student is labeled in the student information system. Sometimes it's something completely not related to academics. And if you don't take a broader step back and look at the entire system and make sure that the data that you're collecting collects the proper things to be able to analyze, you can't make improvement. And this is the biggest change that has happened by the California Department of Education. And in the last 4 years, we have tooled the County Office of Education to be able to support our districts in these processes. But they have options, and not all of them work with us. And those that have not continue to have flat student achievement.
Next question, what are the budget and funding streams of Mendocino County Office of Education?
Okay, well, we have about the annual budget for the County Office of Education is $24 million. We have federal dollars, state dollars, as well as local tax dollars. That's essentially the answer to your question. So the funding comes we have categorical where we have to spend some dollars on very specific items. We have other dollars that are a little more loose. But the dollars that really are of discussion, I think are of importance, are the dollars that relate to how we improve our schools and how we provide support for bettering the student achievement countywide. Those funds are called differentiated assistance. And right now, the county office receives those funds when schools don't meet their state targets. Again, we're asking the governor to please flip that around and provide us a broader base funding to be able to do this work as a preventative measure and not just a reactive measure. If it stays a reactive measure, our students have to perform poorly before schools can get support for continuous improvement. By doing it preventative, we can very much be ahead of the game and work with all of our schools in a more equal fashion.
So the funding sources for the county office are, I don't disagree. She obviously knows that better than I do. I will say that an area of growth that I see is that working with the school districts on how to provide assistance to them. We need to do a better job of involving the school districts so that it does not feel quite so top down, and that school districts are more involved in how those funds are spent and more involved in determining what assistance is needed for them, for their teachers, and that's an area of growth in our county.
So I'm going to throw this question in as a follow-up. Are there ways to improve funding streams for the county? Are there things the county could do to improve its funding streams?
I'm sure that there are ways to improve the funding stream. There's always room for improvement in everything we do. I think that one area of improvement in general, again, as I said in my last response, is really involving the school districts in a transparent process in determining how funds are used and how support is selected for the school districts. The differentiated assistance that comes to the county to provide support for the schools. I have read that's the whole reason why I'm running, is because Ukiah Unified wasn't just given that money. I learned that was a possible reason after I declared my candidacy, so that's not why I'm running. But why I'm running is because our schools really need to be more involved on every level in determining the assistance that they receive and explaining what assistance that they need. So I think that's an area of growth, so that we're not quite so top down, and that's not just from the county office, also within our schools, so that we have a good model of how the schools are not top down, and really listening to the labor unions, listening to the teachers, the staff, the parents, the students, so that we're responsive to the needs of our school districts in our charter schools.
The question is about increasing funding, improving.
You mentioned that the county receives its funding, federal, state, and locally. And, just from my own personal background, I know that it's not cut in stone. The calculations that those different levels use to provide funding are not cut in stone. So what are are there ways that the county could improve their funding through actions that they undertake?
We're a highly funded county office of education, which means when the state gives COLA to school districts, the county office of education does not receive that COLA. So our funding is actually stagnant. We don't increase like school districts increase because of that lack of COLA. One of the things that we, again, as the 58 county superintendents, really proposed to the legislature was to provide more base funding to be able to move the differentiated assistance process, which is a continuous improvement process involving people that are on the ground, engaged in the work, in a cycle of inquiry and data analysis, causal data analysis. So this is not a top-down prescriptive process, but rather a collaborative group process of developing theories of action and acting on those. In doing that, by providing base funding for county offices, we can really work with school districts with a language of improvement from all aspects, not just when we're in a differentiated assistant emergency having to increase student performance because we're not meeting state targets. Also, another area of great improvement for funding would be to create a grant writing team for the County Office of Education, where we go after private industry grants, because the federal government is only 10% of the grant world out there. The private world is 90%, and with a good grant writing team, we could be bringing millions more into our county.
Thank you. Did you support students returning to in-person learning during the 2020-21 school year, the 2021 school year? If so, how did you advocate for your position, and how did you support the returning students?
So we, at the County Office of Education, we built a Road to Reopening workbook. A sample of that is on the table, my campaign table, that guided schools through the process of reopening back in 2020. Now, we have to remember the governor played a trick on us. The governor retroactively placed our school districts and our county into the purple tier the day before Ukiah Unified was slated to open to in-person instruction. That decision alone caused that school district to not be able to open from August all the way until March. What did we do? We complained. We called the governor. We said why. I had a direct line to one of his deputy lieutenants, and we made a big stink. So much so that it was recorded on EdSource, and you can see the interview. It's still archived on EdSource. So it made state level news. We actually sent students home in Mendocino County. One of the private schools actually had to send students home that day. And so that retroactively placing us is really what caused the delay in the largest school district in our county from opening. So it's strong advocacy at the state level. It's making your voice be heard when needed. Unfortunately, the governor held firm and would not allow those school districts to open, despite the noise we made.
Thank you.
I was definitely part of pushing hard to get students back into school. It was a long road. It was a difficult road. We had work with our unions to do, and we had work with our parents and our students to do. It was super challenging. As soon as vaccines were made available, I was instrumental in making sure that students got vaccines in our county, not just for Ukiah Unified, but in other school districts as well. So I helped set up vaccination clinics. I helped schedule myself, especially dealing with helping some of our bilingual parents get students registered for vaccinations. Returning to in-person, even with the hybrid, was a scary thing to do for a lot of families and a lot of staff members. As soon as vaccinations were available, some people felt much more comfortable. So it was really important, it was really important to get the vaccinations to all those that were willing to get them, so that they would be safer and that people would feel more comfortable at school. Even though we were still wearing masks at the time, we were still in hybrid at the time, there were so many steps taken to keep schools safe. Some other things that I did is I worked with the City of Ukiah and the county public health to help with people outside of the schools to get vaccinated, so that we could get people back to work and back to school. It was very apparent that through remote learning, students were really suffering, families were suffering, and those that were suffering the most were from low-income, non-English speaking families. And we needed to do everything we could to get them back into school. We also did what we could to create in-person activities, even during remote learning, so that students can be engaged in something in very small groups, as with safety measures in place.
So that somewhat segues into this next question. How will you reach out to Spanish-speaking families throughout the county to ensure their involvement in their child's education?
Well, this is one of the reasons why I went into education, and one of the reasons why I became bilingual. I didn't really know I was going to become an educator when I learned Spanish, but I knew I wanted to serve others. And in the community where I grew up, the majority of the community spoke Spanish. So I knew that if I wanted to be effective in service and in leadership, the best way for me to do that was to learn Spanish. So as a bilingual educator, which I still consider myself a bilingual educator, even though I'm not teaching in the classroom, reaching out to families is helping schools make sure that they have somebody that can answer the phone in the student's native language. We don't have that everywhere, but it's definitely something to strive for. That can be done through training and through reevaluating some of our hiring practices and some of our job descriptions, to be quite honest. This is every school district I've ever worked in, every administrator I've ever spoken to, an educator I've ever worked with. This is something that they're always striving to do, is reach out to the families to make sure that they feel more comfortable. One of the things that we really need to remember, though, is it's not just what can we do to inform them, it's what and talk to the families, it's also how can we listen and how can we respond. So if they're not coming into our schools, what is not welcoming to them? What is not drawing them in? And that's what we need to change. So we need to constantly be looking at what is our reality. The expectation is not that our Spanish-speaking parents figure out how to navigate through our system. The expectation is that we develop a system that is welcoming to them and that involves them from transitional kindergarten through graduation. And that's one of the things that is a shift in thinking for many of us. Because many of us want to stick with what we have and just invite more people in. But what we really need to do is adjust what we have so more people are naturally drawn to what we're doing.
Thank you.
So the county superintendent has less interaction with families to the level that a district superintendent and a district school board would have. My role as county superintendent really is to help the public learn how to interface and interact with school districts in general. In doing that, I write a monthly column, and I'm on the KZYX radio station with a program called Inside Education. The monthly column that I write is also sent to El Punto to make sure that the Spanish community also has access to that information. So the county office just has less direct play or interface with Spanish families. So it would be our role to help the districts understand how best to work with Spanish-speaking families. We do have a whole section of our agency that supports school districts in working with English language learners, as well as long-term English language learners. That part of our agency, again, takes a continuous improvement approach and works with the school district to be able to collect the right data to determine what part of their system of education is getting the results that they're getting with their English language learners, and then transitioning that process, again, through deep causal analysis and working with a theory of action with the people who are engaged in the work and with the experience. So you would have Spanish families as well as Spanish-speaking students on that team. And the schools would all develop their own theory of action on how to work best. And that's essentially how the continuous improvement process works.
So we're at the time where we will ask for closing statements. Want to thank both candidates for appearing today. I really appreciate it. And Ms. Hutchins gave an opening remark first, so how about if we ask Ms. Glentzer to give a closing remark first?
As a kid from rural California, I know how important it is to have quality education. I know how important it is to make sure that parents from every background feel welcome in the schools. In my family, I was the first to graduate from college, and it was a challenge for my parents to figure out how to get me into college, how to get me through high school. These are challenges that I'm familiar with and that many of our community members are struggling with. I believe that the county superintendent of schools, this role is super important in supporting our schools and supporting our educators. I think that it should be much more visible in our schools. I think that in this role, there's an opportunity to be really much more involved in the community. And as a Spanish speaker and somebody coming from a low economic background, I can relate to so many of our community members. I'm endorsed by 4 of our current superintendents in Mendocino County and 5 of our retired superintendents. I'm also endorsed by the California School Employees Association, the Potter Valley Education Support Professionals, Ukiah Teachers Association, and the Labor Union from Mendocino County Office of Education, and over 100 current educators and board members and retired in the county of Mendocino. I bring this up because I have heard people say, well, what's wrong? Why do we need to change? When educators don't have what they need, they get the job done anyway. You all know teachers that raise money because they don't have enough money for crayons. Now there's money in schools right now, but in the past that's not always been the case. The way they ask for change is they endorse a candidate. So I ask that you would support the educators in our county and vote Nicole Glentzer.
With 28 years in education as a teacher, principal, university instructor, superintendent in 2 rural school districts, and 4 years in the job already, I'm uniquely prepared to serve as your county superintendent of schools. Please do vote Michelle Hutchins, county superintendent. The role of the county office has changed in the last 9 years, with significant changes happening in the last 4. County offices are now newly charged with oversight of the school's accountability with academic achievement, graduation rates, attendance, suspension rates, and college and career readiness. If schools do not make the state targets for all the subpopulations in these areas, then the COE is assigned to offer support for the school. Your vote and support for my re-election sends a message to all schools that it matters to you that student achievement improves, and that it's not okay to have flat student achievement year after year. I recently learned that the Air Force no longer recruits from our county because the student quality is too low. Children deserve choices, opportunities, and options for their growth, no matter where they live, what school they attend, or the wealth of their family. As your county superintendent, I fight for a future where all children experience a high-quality, personalized education, preparing them for the world they live in today. We can make this difference together. It's no longer enough to prepare our children for something. We must now prepare them for anything. I know you agree with me. You want our children to know not only what they learned, but why they learned it and how they will use it. Thank you.
Thank you again for coming and being with us today. Let's take a 5-minute break before we go to our next forum.